Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I am super excited for today's episode of the podcast because I have my boyfriend and partner in crime, Ryan Ferguson, here with me. Ryan, welcome to MBOM.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, this is your second appearance on the podcast.
Oh yeah, I hosted you one time.
Yeah, so you've been on before, and you've technically, I guess, co-hosted a little bit. But today's episode is a little bit different than that because I am interviewing you. And for those people listening who don't know Ryan, Ryan is a practitioner of yoga, but not a teacher. Maybe one day a teacher, who knows? But for now, not a yoga teacher, but he is self-employed, an entrepreneur, and he has a lot of really great information on how you can transition from being a yoga employee to a yoga entrepreneur. He wrote a blog post on mbomyoga.com about that. And today we're going to touch on that topic as well as on this idea of a sales funnel. So to start off with, can you tell me a little bit about what a sales funnel is?
Sure. Yeah. So a sales funnel, as simple as I could say it, is the idea of you as an entrepreneur have various products, even if you're not selling those things, things you are giving away or selling from cheapest to more expensive, and the journey a customer takes through those things. So the idea is you're going to engage with a lot of people at the top with your cheapest products, or what you'd call the top of the funnel. And then people within each layer jump down to the bottom. So for a yoga teacher, for example, the top of your funnel is probably going to be the classes that you're teaching at a studio. And the bottom of your funnel could be something like a yoga teacher training or a retreat you're leading. People probably aren't going to sign up to come on a retreat with you or sign up for a yoga teacher training with you unless they've taken classes with you. They've probably taken a workshop with you. They've kind of vetted you. They trust you. And the way people trust you is by, the way people build trust with you as an entrepreneur or a business is kind of by engaging with you at product or a price point that is less risky for them.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. And I actually like to picture like an actual
so you
funnel.
Visualize it. Yeah.
Yeah, like the type of funnel that you would use to pour liquid into a small topped bottle. And I like to think about like all the little yogis kind of like falling into that funnel.
That sounds kind of evil.
Yeah.
What are you doing with them when you get them in the bottle?
Trap them and then keep them forever. No, it's like Sims like they're not real. But just thinking about, all these people come to your classes, some stay and work their way down further and some don't. And I'm curious, in your opinion, why you think kind of framing around a sales funnel is important for a yoga teacher, because you can make a living off of simply just teaching classes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is where the divide comes up between thinking like an employee or thinking like an entrepreneur. Sales funnel is kind of like a tool and a way to think about your interactions with people. Once you've decided that, hey, I'm not just going to be an employee here, I'm going to think about me as a yoga teacher, as an entrepreneur, or as a business. So your question was, why is it helpful to think in terms of a sales funnel? It's a helpful exercise to go through just to kind of think about how you interact with people at each stage of the process. So maybe you're someone who just purely teaches yoga classes right now. The reason I think you should think about a sales funnel and how you would engage with that exercise, if you only teach yoga classes, the first thing you do is kind of realize, oh, hey, I don't have anything else I'm offering here. I could offer something else. But if you already do offer the other products, then it kind of just helps you streamline how you think about engaging with each person at each level. So to make that a little bit more concrete, if you are purely teaching yoga classes and you have people who really like what you're doing, those people would like to have more of you, more opportunity to interact, more opportunity to get your knowledge, whether that's through private classes or whether that's through a workshop. And if you don't offer anything other than I'm just going to show up and teach at whatever yoga studio I'm teaching at, you're kind of doing them a bit of a disservice is a way to think about it.
Yourself as well.
Yeah. And then yourself as a yoga teacher, you have an opportunity when you're teaching a class to kind of audition for these people, for things beyond that class. You're building trust with these people. And if you just let them walk out the door without offering a next step and how they can move farther with you, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice, because you can create value for those people. You can create value for yourself by offering private lessons, offering even something as simple as connecting with them on email or something like that.
Yeah. I was just thinking as you were talking how an email list is such a good way to keep track of these people and kind of a great way to be able to push them through a sales funnel. It's something that comes up oftentimes with, any industry, but that I hear about in the yoga industry is, I built up this fan base in, city X, and now I'm moving to city Y, and how I'm going to have to start all over. Well, we live in a digital age. You don't really have to start all over when you have the potential to capture all these people online.
Definitely.
And so just to kind of like paint the picture of what the sales funnel would look like. So you mentioned that classes would kind of be the top. And then as you start filtering people down, what does that process look like?
So in the blog post I wrote for you, I just kind of made a really simple looking one. And this is, the levels of this can interact with each other. People can go in different directions or back and forth. But the way I kind of thought about it was classes is at the top, probably private lessons is below that, and workshops and privates probably intermingle with each other. And then you'd have something like retreats at the bottom. And maybe if you're more experienced, a yoga teacher training below that even. It would kind of go in terms of the level of price. And then once you start to think about that, when you go in to teach a class or when you go in to teach a private, what you think about is obviously doing a great job at whatever you're doing, but also how do I move someone further down the line? So if someone comes to my class for the first time, how do I move them down the funnel into something like privates or a workshop? You need to kind of capture them, essentially, whether that's getting their email address, whether that's getting connected with them on Facebook so you can let them know about those things in the future, and just also mentioning if you've got that stuff going on. Hey, if anyone wants to do a private lesson, come talk to me after class. Or just if anyone has any other questions. And then when you get in those conversations, you can offer it. And then, for example, retreats is something that you can offer to people at any point, but the people who have come to your privates and come to your workshops, those are the prime candidates to come invest a bigger sum in the bigger product that you're offering, because they have more trust in you. And obviously they've demonstrated that they're more of a fan. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good piece of advice. I remember there was an episode I did with a yoga teacher named Satara Fields, and she does mostly private yoga. And she was talking about how whenever she goes into a class, it's an opportunity to gain more private clients. And I also interviewed Kate Canal-Potts, who's kind of the expert on private yoga. And both of them kind of touched on this a little bit, and that it's this opportunity to show somebody what more they could learn from you. And so I remember Satara saying how she makes a point of always giving hands-on adjustments. And, that way after class, if somebody's like, wow, I really like that adjustment, I got this like aha moment in this pose. It's like, well, I offer private lessons and I'd be happy to work with you one-on-one if there's some other poses that you think that I could help you out with, type thing. It's always this opportunity to kind of push this person along through your sales funnel. Something that I do think about as a little bit of a challenge is if you're trying to move from being a class-based yoga teacher and just teaching at various different studios to becoming more of, I guess, a yogi entrepreneur or yoga entrepreneur, is doing that without stepping on the toes of the studio owner that you're working for. Do you have any pieces of advice for people going from being yoga employee to yoga entrepreneur?
I think that's something that you would probably have more knowledge about, or people would have more specific knowledge about in their own situations, about how the yoga studio owner thinks about it. I think generally, though, from what I've seen from you and other people I've talked to, people seem to feel scared to like, almost like getting a job at a different studio or offering privates within the yoga studio is somehow like betraying the yoga studio. Whereas, you know, the yoga studio probably doesn't have very much loyalty to you as an individual. If numbers are down, your class will get canceled, no problem. And I feel like you kind of have to be looking out for yourself, first of all, more than anything. So that's kind of, I guess, what I'd say to that point.
Yeah. I think you touched on something that's totally right. I know that I felt really, really awkward having those conversations with studio owners where it's like, oh, I'm actually like teaching somewhere else. And I feel like it is this thing that most yoga studio owners understand, because if you want to be a career-based yoga teacher and you're not pushing people through the sales funnel, or if you're newer at it, you're not going to make enough money to survive at one studio, most likely. In most cases, obviously there's exceptions and different circumstances, but most of the time you're going to be doing the best for yourself if you're teaching at a couple different studios. I guess it's kind of awkward because when you are a teacher at a yoga studio, you kind of embody the brand of that yoga studio, or you kind of become the brand of that yoga studio in a lot of ways because you're the teacher that's teaching there, or one of the teachers. And then you take sort of your personal brand and you leave a piece of it at one studio, and then you take that brand and you leave it at a piece of another studio. And those two studios are probably competitors if they're in the same location. And I think that's where it kind of becomes sort of tricky and awkward. And I think why some people feel really uncomfortable with the idea of even trying to promote themselves even more as individuals.
Yeah. I think something that I noticed coming into the yoga world as kind of an outsider, or you just kind of seeing it, was that it seems to be a very teacher driven thing. Like, people pick yoga classes because it's the teacher that's teaching for the most part. Obviously there's a spectrum between, if you're a new teacher, the yoga studio is probably driving it more. But if you're an experienced teacher, people are probably showing up for you. And so when you're a yoga teacher at a studio and a lot of the people are coming there for you, you almost need to start like reframing your relationship with the yoga studio to say, this isn't an employer, this is kind of a service provider, and the service they are providing for me is a space that I'm renting. And the deal you're doing it is, if you're getting paid a fixed rate to do the yoga class, the deal is, oh, I rent your space and you get all of the upside on anything that we sell. And if so, that's a good deal for you if you're a new yoga teacher, but once you're an experienced yoga teacher, that deal seems less of a good deal. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because there's like pros and cons to sort of being in this employee setting. I was just thinking about how it's kind of a pro if you want to move into offering workshops, because if you already have that rapport, that relationship with the studio owner, and you're a teacher on the roster, you're more likely to get a slot for a workshop than if you're on the outside of that studio. I know for the years that I've worked at the Yoga Lounge, it's really rare that somebody pitches a workshop and that it's actually said yes to. Most of the workshop spaces go to the teachers that are already internal to the studio. And so if you're kind of this like yoga employee that's working for a yoga studio, you do have opportunities to expand that way, but then it's figuring out how to become more entrepreneurial while still working at all these different places.
Yeah. And being like really aware of the value you're getting from the situation.
Yeah. It's kind of, I think it's really tricky, and it's definitely, I don't have all the answers because I am currently working through my yoga sales funnel, which is the reason why we're having this conversation right now. And it's really not, there's no like clear answer. I think it's looking at what's the best opportunity for you and what's going to work best for you. I'm curious if you have any.
Well, so just like one thing to follow up on that. I think as a yoga teacher, just to clarify, the service you're getting from a yoga studio is the space, and then the yoga studio is kind of bringing people because of their reputation kind of shines onto you. And maybe there's other opportunities for privates and whatever. but being very aware of the trade-off you're getting. So it's a great way to get in front of new people. And so maybe you can benefit from going and having a relationship at more than one yoga studio instead of just having it at one, because then you get a better deal out of getting in front of as many people as possible. And then if you've thought about privates or anything like that, you can kind of have more people to put at the top of your funnel.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I was just thinking about how I think probably one of the most beneficial ways to go into being a teacher is to value yourself right off the get-go. I think that when you're a new yoga teacher, it's really easy to just be a yes man and to be really craving the experiences and to feel like you're really lucky to get jobs. That's really how I felt when I was a new teacher. I was so grateful for every opportunity that I got instead of valuing myself for the training and the experience that I did have. And
what do you mean by valuing yourself?
So it's not that I didn't think I was offering like a valuable service, but I kind of felt like, okay, I'm probably the least experienced teacher at the studio. Like I'm offering the least amount of value to the students. Like I'm so lucky to work here. Instead of going in with the mindset of, I work for myself. I choose the places that I work for, and I'm not going to work at a studio that doesn't serve me. And I was kind of thinking as you were talking about how I think that it's really important when you work at somebody else's studio to always ask permission to offer privates to clients or to be able to put a mailing list out. Like, I think that's just a respectful thing to do if it's not your space, because the studio probably has a mailing list that they want people on, and that studio owner might say no, that they're not comfortable with that. And if you're really looking to be an entrepreneur, then it might not be the right fit for you to stay there, because it means that it's going to be more challenging to get people into your sales funnel following along with what you're doing with your business. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Can you rephrase? Agree with what in particular?
Like, do you agree with the idea of coming into the teaching world and really framing yourself as an entrepreneur right off the get-go, as opposed to an employee who's really like kind of desperate for different teaching jobs?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think in any line of work now, you kind of need to be thinking entrepreneurially, but especially in yoga, because I think there's so many ways to create value. But if you just limit yourself to teaching classes at studios, that's a very limited way to create value for people. There's so many other opportunities for you to do, whether that's, teaching something online, coming up with creative ways to get people together in a park, whether that's taking people on a hike and doing yoga at the top of a mountain, or, helping someone work through an injury. There's all these other ways that you can be creative and come up with ways to create value for yourself and someone else. And just to kind of stick in the regular old, I'm just going to teach classes somewhere lane, seems to be more and more a way that's not going to get you a steady income or anything you want, especially because it seems like there's more and more yoga teachers than ever. And
it's growing.
Yeah. And the thing that's interesting about being a yoga teacher is that, like, if you take, for example, any networking event, the person speaking, that's like a very prime spot to be in. People will speak at events for free, or are eager to apply and speak at events for free, just because it's a great opportunity to get in front of a room of people. Anytime you can really get in front of a room of people and you have a service or skill to offer to them, that's a really good position to be in. And as a yoga teacher, you're doing that. So the yoga teachers who do have all this other stuff they can offer to people are going to be more and more willing to do that initial class for a lower rate. And if you're dependent on that money off the start, you're not going to really do well.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of, I think I brought this up a couple episodes ago on a solo episode I did, but, and it's kind of related to what we're talking about, but a little bit off topic, is that I watched an interview that Catherine Brudig did, and she was talking about how Sean Corn came to one of her classes, which is super, super cool because, Sean Corn is Sean Corn, and also super intimidating. But her biggest piece of feedback to Catherine was, you have a platform here. You have a bunch of people who showed up to hear what you have to say, like say something more than inhale, exhale, forward fold. And I think that in that context, it was kind of like use it as a way to spread a deeper message. Sean Corn is very big in sort of the helping the world in like in a bigger way. But I think that is it philanthropic?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought that was the word, but I wasn't sure. But I think that it also offers you this opportunity to let people know what other offerings you have. If you're offering workshops, offering retreats. And it's something that I see a lot with the yoga teachers in, where we were living for a while in Canmore and Banff, is people consistently talking about retreats that they're offering in the mountains, retreats that they're offering in tropical places during the dead of winter in Canada. And it's something I didn't really see in the yoga space as much when I was down in Atlanta. I feel like it was very much more people who were working as yoga teachers at different yoga studios. And I don't know, like people, it was really rare that I heard people being as entrepreneurial about it. Like it's interesting to see different spaces within the yoga industry.
Do you think that's just because there's so many more studios and it was easier to kind of create a life for yourself purely as a teacher?
Yeah, I think that probably is it. I mean, I remember Googling yoga studios to find one even to practice at in Atlanta and was like completely overwhelmed by the number of studios that was there. And I chose primarily on location, which I think a lot of people end up doing because the city's so big and traffic's so horrible. But I think that as a yoga teacher, you could, even as a new yoga teacher, I think that you could, if you put yourself out there, get jobs at probably at least 4 different yoga studios. If you get 2 classes at each of those, that's 8 classes. I mean, you could sustain yourself on probably like 15 classes a week. You might need like another small side hustle depending on what your lifestyle is like, but that's essentially like enough money to get by.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're teaching that much as well, you have less time to offer workshops. It's harder to take off time for things like retreats. It's kind of like I think you almost get sucked into this like teaching, like whirlpool where you just keep like week after week after week. That's what you do. And you're kind of exhausted and you stop thinking about how could I make my business more sustainable or how could I make my career more sustainable?
Yeah. How can you kind of continue to focus on the things that create the most value for you and knock off or automate or delegate the things that create the least value for you that you have to do.
Yeah.
And continue to make your hourly rate go up and up and up and up.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because I spent like probably the first 6 months of being a yoga teacher in Canmore and Banff. And I saw all these people who kind of taught like, I don't know, 1 to maybe 5 classes a week, yet they were like career yoga teachers because they do regular workshops, regular retreats, regular trainings. They have all these other elements of their businesses. And so to me, I was kind of like, okay, that's, where I see my career going. And it wasn't until I was down in Atlanta that I was like, wow, people like really hustle. Like they teach like 20 or 25 classes a week. Like that's crazy. Like, I don't want to do that. Do I even want to be a yoga teacher? It kind of made me doubt a little bit if that was the industry that I wanted to work in because I don't feel like I want to teach yoga 25 hours a week. I would way rather have more of a long-term sustainable career than like a short-term hustle. Does that make sense? Maybe hustle is not the right word, but.
You mean you just don't feel like you'd enjoy it as much?
No, I think I would end up being burnt out and resenting it.
Yeah.
But I think sustainability in your career is really what makes this topic so important. I think that it's really hard to sustain teaching even like 15 classes a week long term. I think that that's really unsustainable for most people.
Yeah. And so the thing I think about just from having some background info is if you're teaching a yoga class to 25 people at a yoga studio and you're making $30 for that class, your barrier to doing something creative on the outside to make more than $30 in that hour is so low. If you can find 7 people to get together in a park and teach them yoga for $10, then boom, $70.
Yeah.
There's like so many more creative ways to make way more money doing other things.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that your park example is definitely valid. I think that that's not even like a great example though is how.
Well, that's just like a random example. You could find a space, but finding someone to do a private lesson with, and you can charge like $50. As if you're a new yoga teacher, you can't really differentiate on terms of quality, but you can differentiate on price. $50 is still a great amount of money to make to spend an hour as a young person. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's around the amount that I was charging when I first started doing privates, and it felt like it was worth the people's time who I was doing it with, and it felt like it was worth my time because it was enough money to make me work for it, yet it wasn't like so little that I was, taking advantage of it. It was more than I was getting paid in a studio setting, and it was, a different experience. I think that, this is a whole nother conversation, is like how to set prices for yourself. But as you become more experienced, obviously you need to charge more for your time. And the biggest thing to think about is if it's worth your time for the money that you're making. Like, do you feel excited about going and doing it because you're making something that's worth it? Is a way that I like to think about it. Yeah. And kind of on like the flip side of that though, when you are new, a great advantage you have is that you can charge way less than other people. And it seems like people don't take advantage of that in yoga as much as they do in other areas of life, where you can really just undercut people. Because, someone was like, oh, I'm a great yoga teacher and I charge $100 per class. And you can be like, oh, hey, I'll do it for like $5 because I'm just looking for the experience.
I feel like there's a lot of people listening who are cringing at that right now, especially if they're a studio owner. I think that the yoga space is unique because if you're a yoga teacher, you usually embody a certain similar philosophies or principles. And I don't know, it's not really like gaining good karma by undercutting your fellow yogis, I guess. That's always been my...
How is that not? But what you're doing is you're creating more value for the people you're servicing as a yoga teacher. Wouldn't that be better karma?
Right. So this is something that I've kind of muddled around, and I asked Jeff Ma his opinion, since he's a popular studio owner in a very oversaturated market, and he would be somebody who, say he charges $150 for a private. Yeah, an hour with Jeff Ma, you're going to get a lot more value than you're going to get with me, but I'll do it for $50. But I think that privates are different than like fully undercutting classes, I guess. If you're like, oh, hey, the studio's running this class for $20 drop-in, I'll just run like a similar class at the same time for $10 drop-in or for $5 drop-ins.
Yeah, but so the thing, I think it's really important to be clear on the function that the yoga studio serves, and how it's changing because of the internet. So we already kind of talked about its role as just being a physical space where you can teach yoga. Also, a yoga studio is kind of an authority. It provides people with a certain sense of confidence that whatever goes on in there, it's going to be at least a certain level of quality. So it kind of, if you think about restaurants, there's a good example of this. In like 1995, a chain restaurant was much more attractive because there wasn't a way to independently verify the quality of something. So you could look at the keg, for example, and say, no matter where I am, I know. Well, I guess that's Western Canada. So if you're in Western Canada, you can look at the keg and say, I know what I'm going to get there. Same with like McDonald's or whatever, Denny's. You know exactly what you're going to get there. And so that name has value to it. And so in a kind of a pre-social media internet age, as a yoga teacher, you really had to rely on a yoga studio because a random person's not going to want to take a chance on you. And it's very hard for you to organize consistent events for the people who are real fans of what you do without that space. Now, as an individual, you have a ton of power. You have a better ability to connect with your audience now than a yoga studio did 15 years ago, basically. It's like if you got a Facebook page and friends on Facebook and an email list. So the value of a yoga studio as an intermediary between students and teachers has dropped significantly with the internet. But, it still is very valuable as kind of a ritual or like a temple kind of space because having a ritual aspect to it is important, and it's still very valuable as a new yoga teacher because it gives you a community, a network, a way to build your brand. As an individual yoga teacher, it's flexible now in a way that it wasn't. And it's becoming more and more so as you can teach online and as you get platforms that allow you to connect with people going completely around the yoga studio. And if you eliminate that cost, because a yoga studio is an expensive place to run, if you eliminate that cost, you can provide a service at a much cheaper price.
Yeah.
Does that connect?
Yeah, no, definitely. That kind of made me think about how we can kind of tie this all together for listeners who, if anyone listens to Rand and I's travel podcast, we often go on these like long bunny trails, and it's like we have to figure out how it ties back to our initial topic, which is something I love about our conversations. And so I'm happy to go on that here. But it kind of makes me think about how there's almost like a process to being a yoga teacher. It's like you enter the yoga space, you look for yoga studios that sort of meet your personal brand. And so by that, I mean spaces that will allow you to teach what you want to teach the styles that you feel the most excited about, and hopefully give you the freedom to do things like play your own music, choose your own props, that sort of thing, which most studios will allow you to do. And so you find these studios and you teach there, but always keeping this entrepreneurial mindset of, I work for myself. Like I don't work for the studio. I work at the studio, but I work for myself.
Or even the studio is like a service provider to me as a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
This is providing a space and students.
Yeah, definitely. I've had a conversation with another yoga teacher about just that, how in a lot of ways the yoga industry is changing to sort of bigger chains that are owned by investors who are not really even in the yoga space, and they're not really quote unquote studio owners. They're business owners, but they're not, they've hired somebody who is passionate about yoga to kind of run that studio, and it becomes exactly that. Less of a community feel for sure and something like that. But I think, thinking about the studio as a place as a service that allows you to facilitate, and then not everyone's going to like what you're going to put out there. That's just a fact of being a yoga teacher, and amongst other industries, there's always going to be people who don't like what you do. And the people who do like what you do, holding on to those people. It only takes a couple of people who really like what you do before you can get reviews that you can put on your Facebook page, your website. You can use those to legitimize yourself.
Legitimify.
I like that. It's officially a word.
Yeah, that's what happens in the South.
We legitimify ourselves. You legitimize yourself, and all of a sudden, you can gain email addresses. It only takes one email address before you need to send out a newsletter. So you get a couple people on your mailing list. All of a sudden, you've now got this vessel that you teach at, or maybe a couple of vessels that you teach at, people who are interested in what you're doing. Bam, you start running workshops. Workshops are going well. Let's make that into retreats. Maybe you start with weekend long ones kind of in your home area, your home base, take people somewhere cool. And then maybe you expand it to international if that goes well. And kind of growing slowly like that.
Yeah, it kind of is it's like a staircase, or maybe a ladder.
Isn't it like a funnel?
But your experience as a yoga teacher is kind of just, you always want to keep climbing, finding somewhere new to do something new.
Yeah.
And focusing on, what do I do that's creating the most value for me and other people? How can I do more of that and less of the stuff that's not? And keep kind of chugging up that hill.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's a great way to think about it. And something that I struggled with as a new yoga teacher was coming out and being like, I want to do it all. I want to do it all now. But then having no resources to do it, and kind of just completely going the other direction and being like, okay, I'm just not going to do anything then. And I think that's a lot of people. I think that it's really, you have all these aspirations when you go into a teacher training, or when you come out inspired, and then you enter the world and you're like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know. I'm just going to give up and go back to hide in my room and bury my face in a pillow and just not do anything. But I think that thinking about it in stages and really thinking about the people who are coming to your class as people that you can filter into your other offerings. And something that's really interesting about the business of yoga is that sometimes stuff like that gets too businessy. Like people are like, you know, they think about like actually taking the people who come to their classes and who enjoy their stuff, like they're actually pushing them through a funnel and trying to just like sell them stuff. But it's like, if they're coming to your classes, it's because they like what you're offering and you're offering them a service that is bettering their lives. And
they're only going to take it if they believe that to be true.
Right.
Unless you're like guilting them into it. But that's like a matter of approach, not a matter of, you know, the fact you're doing it.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know where along the line this happened because, you know, we grew up in the 90s when car salesmen had already existed for a number of years, but people kind of get sales as like slimy door-to-door people or these slimy car sales guys who are just trying to upsell you on like the leather seats and the rooftop window or whatever. And sales is all over the place.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing when you as an entrepreneur or when someone else as an entrepreneur creates something that's going to meet my needs and make my life better. And they come to me and they say like, hey, I made this thing. It's going to make your life better and you can pay less for it than I'm going to get out of value. I'm going to get more value out of it than I'm paying for it.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
It kind of.
So in any trade you're making, you obviously think that you're getting more value out of it than you're paying for it. And same on the other side. So trade is something that's win-win. Both people win when you buy something from someone. And so if someone comes up with a new product, whether that's a tight hamstrings workshop, and then they come to me and say, oh, Ryan, we've got a tight hamstring workshop. It's only $35. I'm like, sweet, I can pay $35, something that's going to make my life more than $35 better. We both win. The world is now, you know, fractionally richer because of that thing that just happened.
Slightly more flexible in the backside of the legs. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
So many possibilities open up.
Yeah. Good one. Yeah, no, I definitely understand that in that context. I think that a lot of times when you become a yoga teacher, you kind of embody the spiritual aspects of yoga and, you know, you kind of fall into this beliefs around karma and you want to have like good energy with the people around you and you want to create good relationships with your students. And it's easy to think like, oh, I don't want to be like the slimy sales guy who's just like shoving private lessons down their throat or like shoving workshops down their throat or like forcing them to pay like $2,000 to come to Thailand with me. And I think it kind of causes a lot of yoga teachers to sort of like shy away from offering things, but remembering.
Well, so how do you think you sell things in a way that's not like that?
Well, I think that it's just what you're offering. Like, I think that it's reminding yourself that as a yoga teacher, you're offering the gift of yoga. You're offering the gift of meditation. You're offering, you know, a really amazing rejuvenating week with organic vegetarian food, maybe somewhere like Costa Rica, and people will only pay for that if they want it.
Yeah, and the kind of slimy feeling comes from almost like a fraudulent nature to something.
Right. And so I guess my point is that, you know, if you're a yoga teacher listening to this being like, oh, I hate sales, I don't believe in sales, I think that salespeople are slimy, it doesn't need to be the case. It definitely can be the case, but if you're offering something that's really genuine to you, like a workshop that you've spent a lot of time on, that you're really passionate about, yeah, you should definitely tell the students that are coming to your class about it, because to not offer that to them is a disservice to them. Why would you not tell the people who come to your regular classes about this amazing thing that you're offering, that you're going to run, that they're probably interested in? I think that's sort of like the shift that needs to happen inside your head too. Not your head, inside heads of people who are resistant to selling the things that they can provide to their students.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Awesome. Do you have any other thoughts on sales funnels, being an entrepreneur in the yoga sphere?
Yeah, so I would just challenge people listening, if you haven't done this already, to just take out a piece of paper, draw one line from like the top left-hand corner side and down at a slanting angle, and one from the right and down to the middle in a slanting angle. So it looks like a funnel, and then draw some lines across the funnel, and put yoga classes at the top, and fill in those lines of the funnel with things that you think that you could offer right now or in the future. And then kind of identify how you connect with and move people from each part of the funnel to the next part of the funnel.
Yeah.
And then just going through that exercise, I feel like opens your mind to creative ways that you could make more money and
make it more sustainable too.
Yeah. Yeah, and just opens your mind to the idea that the person who walks in the door for a yoga class isn't a minimally valuable one-time customer. This is a potentially massively valuable lifelong customer if you build a good relationship with that person. So having that funnel and saying, hey, I may not be ready to teach a yoga teacher training right now or to lead a retreat right now, but I sure as hell could do a private lesson for someone. Or I could, create YouTube videos for people. It's anything like that. Just going through that exercise, kind of defining it and defining how you are going to connect with people in a way that allows you to promote those things to them.
Yeah, I love that. And then even like a second part that I would add to that exercise is once you do that, maybe see if you can list 5 to 10 people at the top of the list who come to your classes regularly, who are people that might be interested in some of your other offerings within your sales funnel, and just see what that looks like for you. Just depending on where you're at, maybe it's really easy to list 10 people. Maybe it's challenging to even get 2, but 2 people is more than 0. So just working through that process and seeing, who are those people who would definitely come to that arm balancing workshop that you could offer, because that's something that you're really good at.
So I think something that would be interesting that just popped in my head was your story of you're getting your second client for private lessons and how that happened and the lesson you maybe took away from that.
Yeah. So that happened super organically. I was out for coffee with somebody who had been coming to my classes regularly for probably about 6 months. And I was just telling her a story about the private lessons that I was offering. And she kind of went, oh, wait, do you offer privates? And I was like, oh, yeah, kind of. Like, I guess I do. I guess I kind of do. Not really in any form of confident way, which is not how I would recommend going about that. I would definitely recommend being like, yeah, I do. This is what we do. And these are my rates. Sell yourself. But I was super passive about it. Anyway, she goes, do you have time in the next week to, do a private with me? And I was so floored that it happened just like that. I was like, really? Are you sure? You want to pay me? You want to pay me so that I can teach you more yoga? Okay. Yeah, okay. I can do that. But yeah, just knowing that, talking about that sort of stuff, you never know who's interested. And I don't know, looking back on it.
It's just like, there's like people, if there's people who come to your yoga class all the time and you don't offer, even put that offer out there, like these people could be waiting and eager to give you money to teach them.
Right. Yeah. That's what.
But they just don't know that it's an option.
Right. That's what I was thinking about. Like looking back on it, I'm like, duh, Amanda. Like she came to all of your classes. She was super interested. Like she came to like early morning classes. She came to like every studio that I taught at, which is such dedication. She was just something about what I was offering really spoke to her at that time for her. And, I was really, really, really touched by that. And I think that had I been in an entrepreneur, sell myself mindset at that point, I would have probably offered privates months and months in advance of when I actually started doing that, because unfortunately I was moving at that point. So we only had the chance to do one private lesson together. But yeah, learn from my organic private lesson. And if you have people who are coming to your classes, they like what you're putting out there, something that you're doing is really speaking to them on a deeper level. It's helping them where they're at in their practice. So, make more money for yourself, get more learnings for yourself, and help your student more. That's really what it's all about. As yoga teachers, we want to serve our students and we want to help people feel better in their body. And there's no harm in you making a living while doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you can find out more on the show notes at www.mbomyoga.com. I'll put links to both of the articles that Ryan has written about being a yoga entrepreneur, as well as the sales funnel. And if anyone has any questions or comments about the sales funnel, you can send me an email at info@mbomyoga.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening, and namaste.